Welcome to Talk to Connect, the podcast where we explore how to have transformative engagement to create stronger personal and professional relationships. I created this podcast because connection with others has become more difficult in this time of heavy social media, differing viewpoints, and increased anxiety in the world. I'm your host, Michelle Franklin, so let's talk to connect. This episode is Reflect and Select, your blueprint for a life of impact in 2026 for those who want to make an impact in the lives of those around them in 2026. Now, I must admit, I stopped doing resolutions years ago because I find doing something that has a name that is only used once a year doesn't really lend itself to consistency, okay? So it's like saying happy birthday to someone and you only say it to that person once a year, and your mind knows that. So it's not associated with an act that is done on a consistent basis. So instead of resolutions, I just say, this is what I'm going to work on for this upcoming year, because every year I want to work on something that involves personal growth. So we should never become so complacent with who we are or so arrogant to think we no longer need to grow. And that's why two main staples of all of my episodes are asking reflection questions and providing tools. So this episode will be for you to reflect and select. So I reviewed my previous 7 episodes from this year and pulled out the top 5 reflection questions that I received the most comments on, as well as 5 tools. So going into 2026, you can choose one reflection question to ponder before the end of the year and select one tool to take into the new year to implement. Now, I always view the end of the year really as a time of reflection, during my, what I like to call mini hibernation. I've taken the last 2 weeks of December off for the last probably 9 to 10 years. And for me, that time is really spent to really reflect on the year, what went well, what didn't, the traditional kind of self-reflection, but also really to put some goals into place for the upcoming year of just personal growth and what it is that I want to work on. And so many of you know that when I started the podcast, it was really to share ideas, experiences, knowledge, skills that I've actually utilized that has made a difference in my life, personally and professionally. So I have to admit, the insecure part of myself wondered if anyone would find anything of value in what I had to say. So I'd like to share that I'm really touched and honored to share that it's been about 4 months, exactly 4 months since the launching of Talk to Connect across 8 different podcast platforms. And we're currently at 25,000 subscribers. That's just is wild to say. So I'm glad there's been value from the podcast, and I'm looking forward to growing the audience in 2026. So I'm going to give you the top 5 reflect and select sets of questions and corresponding tool to go along with the reflection question. So let's get started with the first set. So this first 2 sets actually of reflect and select will apply to any personal or professional relationships. Okay, so reflection question number 1. Who is the person you are carrying annoyance or frustration for? Okay, the name that first popped into your mind when I asked that question is your opportunity for growth in 2026. Now, the tool to address reflection question number 1, I covered in the first episode of defining hard conversations, and it's the HARD framework that I developed. And in that episode, I discussed pre-work that you want to do because it can provide you with just a deeper level of insight and understanding as to why that annoyance or frustration actually exists. And that's important work in this opportunity for growth for you. Otherwise, it'll just continue to be a finger pointing type situation, and there's zero growth in that, right? We already know that. So if you do choose to have that hard conversation with the person to clear the air, Utilize the HARD framework. So, reminder, H is for heart, truly wanting what's best for that person. A is for appreciation, acknowledging and speaking to their potential. R is for real, sharing a real story of growth that you needed to go through to exhibit a similar type of development you needed to make in your life. And D for direct, be straightforward. Don't beat around the bush or be vague. Now, reflection question number 2. What's one conversation that you know you need to have and have been avoiding, where you've approached it with curiosity would make a ton of difference in how that conversation could be received? So, the tool to address reflection question number 2 was covered in the last episode when I discussed another framework that I developed called C.A.V.E, which is a way of being in the midst of having a challenge with someone. So, C for curiosity keeps you from straying into passing judgment. A for accountability keeps you from straying into the blame game. V for vulnerability, planting seeds of trust and connection. And E for empathy, allows you to have grace with others and yourself. Now, this third set of reflect and select pertains to parents. So, reflection question number 3. Are you being the type of parent you would have wanted as a kid? So, the tool to address reflection question number 3 is to use the C.A.V.E framework to have a conversation with your child or children. And that's regardless of their age. And ask them, what do you like the most about me as a parent? And what do you think I can improve? And in that conversation, make sure you are listening and asking questions out of curiosity. And then take accountability for what it is you need to own. Be vulnerable and admit if you have fears or insecurities about parenting. And most of all, during and after the conversation, allow yourself to have empathy for your own shortcomings as a parent. The fourth set of reflect and select pertains to workplace leadership. So, reflection question number 4, ask yourself, do you know if you are admired or respected for your leadership? So, the tool to address reflection question number 4 is to use the HARD framework to have one-on-one conversations with your team, asking them, what do you think of me as a leader? Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, but are they really going to be honest with me? Good question. 1, you can only control what you can control. But as a leader, do your part in initiating and asking the question, right? 2, in using the HARD framework, the H is for heart. So you want to do your work in getting your heart in a good place and space before asking the questions. Now, usually what I do when I know there's a possibility I may hear something that's going to cause me a potential ouch moment is I just immediately tell myself, okay, Michelle, be prepared to hear something you may not like, but need to hear for your own growth. Now, does that make the ouch not happen? Absolutely not. Sorry, bet you thought I was going to tell you something that would allow you to avoid the ouch. Nope, not at all. My life experiences, this podcast is not at all about avoiding the ouch, but how to handle it, knowing that it's like Thanos, it's inevitable. So, in saying the obvious to them, that often will actually create space for honesty. So, I've said, I know this may be awkward for you. It's kind of awkward for me too. But I'm asking because I genuinely want to know so I can grow from it because I don't know what I don't know, or something to that effect. And I find that that often actually creates a really great space for both of us actually to have honesty without the blame and without judgment. Now, the last reflection question, number 5, is a two-part question. How do you want to show up in 2026? And what kind of impact do you want to make? And the tool to address reflection question number 5, well, it's kind of a choose your own adventure because it's based on what your answer is, whether it would be utilizing the H.A.R.D framework or C.A.V.E framework. Journaling and meditating are also tools to bring about awareness on who you are and what growth you want to make. Now, I'll share when you are intentional with your growth, personal or professional, do expect barriers. Some of those may actually come from people you know and in the form of discouragement, because the more you shine, the more it reveals the dim light of others. So you may hear something like, you're acting different, with it being said in a way that it's a bad thing, right? So, one response you could have with a great big smile to disarm the negativity and say, yes, absolutely. And thank you for noticing. It's called growing. Because think about it. Is there supposed to be a certain age we reach where we're mentally, intellectually, or emotionally stop growing? Well, I hope not. And to me, that would be a sad and uneventful life if we're okay and just settling with the knowledge or skill set or even experiences that we had, I don't know, through what, 35, 40 maybe, and then growth and development just stops. Well, that sucks. I mean, that's just is boring. Lastly, I like to utilize the podcast to not only share tips and tricks to build stronger relationships with others, to have transformative engagement, but you all know by now that I also share my 57 years, so it's not just from theory, but from actual results in my life. So I want to share a short story about the impact you can make as one person and how that has a domino effect into the lives of others. So, you all know I have shared about my son, and he just turned 16. And like many parents who think the world of their kids, I am no different. If you ask me about him, I can talk probably literally for hours. And last week, I had such a profound, moving moment with my son that really reminded me of the impact that we have on others, and actually was the catalyst for this particular episode. So he and I are in the Starbucks, and we're just sitting there having a conversation, just talking. And a homeless lady walks up to us, and she looks directly at my son, doesn't look at me at all, which was interesting. She only looked at him, focused on him, and asked if he had any money. And he said he didn't, because he and I typically don't carry cash. And she said, okay. And she walked back to her table. And so I often will try to give whatever I have. But again, I only had $1, didn't have more than that. Went to the cash register and asked if I purchased something, if they would give me cash back. And they said, no, they don't do that. So I felt really bad. And I was like, I don't want to just give $1. That's insulting. And then I thought, give what you can, right? And so for some reason, instead of me walking over to the table and giving it to her, I gave it to my son, probably because it seemed like she felt more comfortable with him since she only directed her conversation towards him. So I gave it to him. And, sometimes with teens, you want them to do something. They're like, oh, might roll their eyes or do whatever. My son did none of that. He took the $1. He walked over to her. And at this point, she's standing at her table. So he walks over to her, gives her the $1, and she proceeds to go into, I don't know, probably a 5-6 minute conversation with my son. And so they're both standing there, and I could hear her saying that she needed to get somewhere on the bus and didn't have enough money, and she was supposed to get medication for her disorder, but she wasn't able to get there. And then she proceeds to start crying. And my son just automatically went and hugged her. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm raising such a wonderful, caring young man. And so he proceeded just to stand there and just wasn't irritated or bothered or anything as she was just describing the situation she was in. And it just touched me so much that he just was there with her, present with her. And then he came back to the table. And I just said, thank you for taking that over to her. I can tell more so than the dollar, just you seeing her and acknowledging her made a difference for her to get emotional with you. And he was just listening. And then I actually had a thought triggered when I was in a similar situation in college when I had no money. I was supposed to have rode with a friend home, and they left school early. And now I'm like 7 miles from my house, and I just proceed to walk. And I figured I'll just ask for money along the way to get on the bus, and either I'll get enough or I'll make the walk 7 miles. One of the two will happen first, right? And so for some reason, as I'm telling my son this story, I started getting emotional about, putting myself in that situation of having to ask a stranger for money to make it on the bus. And so I'm getting emotional. I'm starting to tear up. My voice is cracking, probably kind of like it is right now. And then my son, in his just 16-year-old wisdom, he kind of, in a way, kind of cut me off. And he said, but you're here now, you're strong, you made it through that, you're providing for us, you're caring for me, you're caring for your mom, and you've done all these things, and you've come so far. And I just was like listening to like this motivational speaker at 16 who just got finished comforting a person he doesn't know, and now he's comforting his mom. And I just thought, oh my goodness. In that moment, I felt like so much of the work that I had put into him, having hard conversations and talking to him about, knowing his worth, and talking to him about caring for others, and that it's not just about you in life, it's also about the impact you have on others, that all of that in that moment started actually growing like a flower right in front of me. And so I just wanted to take a moment to share that, because it really reminded me that the conversations that I've had with him and seeing that in action, even as a teenager, of caring and encouraging others, is a reminder that it's never just about us. It's always about the connections that we have with others. And if there's anything in this podcast or other episodes that has added value to you in connecting with others, I'd love to hear that feedback, because that is truly what keeps me wanting to plant these seeds, not only for my son, but for the audience as well, because this is definitely a very interesting time in our lives with a lot of negativity, a lot of discouragement. And I'm just here to try to support those who want to continue to be positive, to be a light, to connect with others and move forward, and knowing that it is strength in numbers in us coming together. And so make 2026 a wonderful year, and I look forward to sharing even more. Thank you for listening to Talk to Connect. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to follow or subscribe to my podcast and share it with others. A new episode will drop every other Tuesday. And if you have a question you'd like me to answer on a future episode, email me at michelle@letstalktoconnect.com. That's Michelle, spelled Michell. That's 2 L's, no E on the end, at letstalktoconnect.com. So let's continue talking to connect and create transformation in our personal and professional relationships.